One.
Should we have coffee?
Shit.
Let's put your coffee up.
Wait, I'm not allowed to have coffee?
Yeah, okay, fine. All right, let's see who's coming.
Ease me into the whole
don't
world.
take away your crutches too fast. Happy Monday, friends. This is Daniel Fox. I'm not always doing my live videos alone anymore because it's just so much more fun to bring in and share the love. And I met Bowspring. I met Daniel a few weeks back. We're both in the same business mastermind group. And Daniel is an amazing business coach and has stepped into this program maybe unknowingly that he was going to start to tap into this Bowspring methodology. And he had a little bit of trepidation since the retreat that we were at together that kicked off this work. And I recognized that he had a little bit of fear and maybe a little bit of unknown concern and, you know, in general, just totally irrational behaviors against something that you don't understand.
Irrational?
Totally. But so I told him I wanted to be completely supportive of his journey and to push him a little bit to understand what this Bowspring world is all about. So maybe you can explain why it was rational in your mind to have any concern with it.
Okay. So I'm somebody who, like, I've done a little bit of yoga.
Okay.
And then I like did a little bit of gym stuff. You know, I've like had gym memberships here and there, but like for the most part, my body like doesn't feel good and like kind of hurt and like, or I've like changed clothes. There's just a lot, I have a lot of stories about doing a movement practice.
Okay.
It hurts, and most of it is that it hurts.
It hurts.
And it sucks. I'm like out of breath and my body hurts. But sometimes I like it. Like sometimes I have a good thing, but if it's the difference between working or doing whatever, oh, you got a low battery in your Insta.
Thank you.
If it's the difference between like choosing to go do something else that I see as like productive, or doing a movement practice, I'll do something else.
Go do productive.
Yeah, and time again, people who have like been in my life in a relationship to speak to what's missing, they've been like, you need to move, dude.
Yeah.
So here I am, and I just moved to Denver.
Right.
And I thought that's what they meant.
So no, the movement piece is super crucial for energy to flow, for stagnation, for disease to be able to be pushed through the body, and for energy to just continuously cycle through, which is how the body really helps to heal itself. And when he's talking, you know, you're saying that you were out of breath, your body was hurting. These are some evidences that that's what you need to go towards, right? Which is just enough reason to not do it, right? Because it's sort of disconcerting, unsettling. But it's also the sort of like follow the yellow brick road sign that you got to keep going to push through that so that you can maybe get to the other side. Yeah,
that I would, if I'm not good at something, I would want to, you know, it's nature to avoid it, but maybe it's probably good to develop that.
And maybe as a high functioning, high achiever, like you want to be good at something immediately.
High functioning?
Well, you're reaching, right? We're all striving, aren't we? But when there's this desire to be good at something or to understand it right away, we can have this really big block against sucking at something, right? Like we don't want to not look good or not do something well. And so that's enough reason to never try something new. This is like as new as it gets, right? So what do you even know? Like what have you heard? What's your experience so far of the Bowspring itself?
Okay, so I probably did about 30 or 40 minutes all told in my life.
Total.
Maybe 45 minutes total between 2 sessions of Bowspring type of movement. So I understand that there's like a certain way that you orient your body posturally, and that doing so kind of like, maybe it kind of undoes some of the protection mechanisms that we like go to protect our body. So there's like a vulnerability or openness to it. Something has to do with like the way that your spine goes. Like there's a double S curve that gets talked about.
Oh, good language.
There's something called radiant heart, which is somehow it has to do with the posture, like that, and then something called central channel.
Yeah.
And so that's almost like feeling into like a hollow spiritual or physical space from kind of the lower part of your abdomen up to the top of your head.
Yeah.
So that's kind of everything that I know.
Yeah, which with all these separate pieces that you know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense necessarily, right? So there's this like the spine thing, and then this heart metaphysical thing, and then there's like the posture. So it makes sense that it's like, you know, kind of a lot in the brain. When I introduce it, I often give three focuses, and you sort of alluded to them. So the number one is that we have an internal alignment. A lot of other physical exercises like maybe modern postural yoga or even a CrossFit or a Zumba, you're going to be told instructions that are very much about your arms, your legs, how you place yourself in the physical. But when we start with the internal alignment, it's an entirely different relationship to the places from where we're moving and to how we're able to be more effective and, as you're saying, changing patterns, right?
What am I saying? Oh yeah, so the patterns would be like tightening my body or getting small or getting like kind of into more of a fear position.
Fear position, fetal position, curl up into a ball, shut down, call it what you will. We all have universal tendencies when we go into the fight or flight response.
Okay.
So a lot of us are in the stress response all day long, and we're probably more curled in. So when we actually go into this first internal alignment, which is what we're going to talk about today, that actually gives us an entirely different foundation to start from any other physical modality. And then it does kind of interweave then this sort of metaphysical concepts, which we'll go into of Radiant Heart and Central Channel. But the second piece that I tell people, in addition to the internal alignment, is that we go for the double S curve of the spine, which you already mentioned, which we'll kind of go into a touch today. And then the third piece that I include is that we give ourselves a hug around the whole body. Right? So it's not a hug that just focuses on the bicep, or it's not a focus on just one part of the body ever. We really try to create a uniform tone, and then that's how we start to activate and engage the global system of the connective tissue matrix, the myofascial system, which over the last 10 to 15 years has just become groundbreaking, revolutionary. Look at Chris is there. Groundbreaking and revolutionary for us to understand the body as a system instead of working on only separate pieces and parts. Okay, so those are the three things: internal alignment, double S curvature of the spine, and uniform tone around the entire body, a whole physical structure, which actually creates, when all of those three pieces are put together, a dynamic energy called tensegrity. It's actually an architectural model that talks about suspension, so your bones themselves don't hold you up. We kind of have this old idea that we have to stack all the bones, and then that way, just like a building, we're going to be held up. When we work with the connective tissue, the bones actually get pulled apart. And so the suspension of no bones ever touching, no joints ever overwearing because there's no compression, that's what actually gives us the sense of lightness and a whole different way of holding posture from the inside out. Okay, questions on that?
No, that makes sense. So tensegrity would be like tension and integrity, like a portmanteau of the words.
I love that. Yeah, because the integrity that we're holding is that every part of the body is including is that every part of the body is holding itself and doing the work that it's meant to do. We're chilling out the martyrs and we're waking up the freeloaders, is what I like to say. So the front of the body tends to be overworked and martyred. So does the low back, so does the neck. And then there are other parts in the body that are freeloaders, like the back of the legs, the glutes and the hamstrings, and sometimes even the core. And so we're waking up all of those places to bring ourselves into balance. So the integrity is that every part is working.
Everything.
And the tension is that there's suspension. You're from the inside out creating this push-pull dynamic, so the body is in constant play with itself and never overworking one part. So it takes a little while.
You're good at this.
Thanks. I've done this for a bit.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. So those are the sort of snapshot, elevator pitches, whatever I've been able to come up with. Today I want to talk just quickly about your body and how it is today and how we can bring in those subtle concepts of central channel and radiant heart, which we kind of start at the most challenging. I want to say challenging in a way that's encouraging, because the energetic place of the body of talking about this inner space, talking about your heart, talking about your attitude, it's a little less quantifiable, right? It's not as easily measured, and so it has to be a little bit more about what it is you're bringing internally. What's your dialogue? What's your attitude? What's your emotional state? Because when you're sad, collapse, or when you're sad or feel like heavy at life, what's your general posture?
Like I'm on the couch and I'm like up here. Yeah. I'm like curled.
Which is its own soothing. Can you see that, guys? Like, this is its own way that we actually soothe ourselves. When we're in the fight or flight response, we shut down, and it's soothing for the nervous system. We literally shut it all down. But when we open, you had mentioned this before we started, there's a little more vulnerability there, right? There's a space that there's where you're actually exposing places that would rather be protected. So knowing that that's the default, and then, so that's when you're in a sad emotional state, right? But what about when you're at your computer? What about when you're standing? Daniel's actually a really tall guy, and me being kind of a shorter person, I kind of have to play bigger. So it makes sense for me to stand up tall. But when he's standing, go ahead and just show them. Comparison, right? A whole different head above me, right? So when he's talking to me or someone like me, what does he do? What does he have to do to accommodate? He actually does what I would encourage tall people to do, because he makes his foundation wider, but there's subtle things that I can help him with that'll make his butt better, that'll make him stronger, that he doesn't even know about yet. But so this is how he accommodates. But there was something else about your posture you're doing regularly.
Well, I think so. I don't know.
Can you do that sideways, actually?
What?
What you just did? Can you see how far forward his hips are? Like, he's just like a pelvic thrust. He's like walking into the room with his pelvis leading the way. And that's, yeah, it's not just guys, but a lot of people do this. And so it's important to know how we lead with certain parts of our body. A lot of us lead with our head too. And then how else would you say when you're standing, when you're not necessarily accommodating for a small person, but just in general, like you showed me, like your one-legged position, yeah. And so face this way, if you will. And so the weight kind of shifts. You can see that it drops into one leg, one knee, one hip. Even the low back gets a little bit compressed.
Yeah,
and he doesn't have any weight on one leg. So when we're talking about integrity, this is completely out of balance because his right side is holding all of the weight and left side is completely freeloading. So we're really looking to bring the whole balance into the entire structure. And then another way, you're kind of hands on hips, and the whole inner body collapses. So it's so interesting because if I came in and I wanted to tell him traditionally how to have good posture, he could still hold this internal shape and then say, all right, well, squeeze your shoulder blades together and then you'll stand up straight. Look, he just squeezed his shoulder blades together, but he didn't have to change anything in his interior alignment. So go ahead and sit back down for me, if you will. So that's why we start always with the invisible conversation of central channel and radiant heart. This is so cool that he introduced this because I always love to hear from other people what their language is. Now this, with Daniel and I, this is going to be an ongoing. We're going to meet again next week on Tuesday live in front of you guys. So this is going to be a process. But today I wanted to talk about those two concepts that are a little bit harder to understand, again, not so quantifiable, not as easy to measure, but something that we have to go back to again and again and again because it puts us individually, our person, our attitude, our identity, our presence in an empowered place. It puts from the inside out, we fill our structure from our attitude, from our capacity to be in our own radiant energy. And I use that specific. I know, I get it.
That kind of blew my mind. Wait,
okay.
You said we fill our structure with our capacity to be what?
In our own radiant energy.
Okay, what does that mean?
From our own radiant
What does that mean?
Right.
Okay.
So if I'm feeling pissed off at the world, I'm going to have a little bit more prickly armor around me because I'm ready to fight. If I'm feeling scared of the world, I'm going to be a little bit more diminished. I'm going to be meek and meager. And this is all reflected in posture. When I become very boastful, very proud, what often happens is I kind of lead with this over-open front solar plexus. My front chest gets all puffed up like a rooster, right? And we lead with this sort of superficial braggadocious, if you will, right? And that's what is traditionally thought of as good posture. Squeeze your shoulder blades together and your chest gets kind of puffed up and out. You can't see it maybe from your angle, but the minute he does that, his head pushes forward out of alignment, right? So he squeezes his shoulder blades and his head actually moves into the front plane of the body. If I gave him my hand, relax your arms again so you're not squeezing, and just had him push back into me, push into my hand, that's it. You can see how his head starts to move back a little bit more vertical over his central column. Okay, so before we get to the alignment, talking about energy, our own radiant energy, meaning we feel good. We don't feel in competition with the world. We don't feel at threat with the world. We don't feel like we have to prove ourselves to the world. We just get to show up with all of our faculties, all of our skills, talents, desires, all of those things awakened and supported. And when we have that internal energetic presence of just feeling good, not overbearing and not being meek and meager, then we have this sort of radiant energy that, in my opinion, it generates itself. It's ongoing. It's not draining. It's not taxing. It actually refuels itself.
We were talking about benefits to this practice.
Yes.
And sometimes it's hard to do because it's a little bit abstract.
That's
You're
right.
like, we're going to change your posture, and then what's going to happen?
Mhm.
But that to me sounds like something that inspires me. Like I have the opportunity to change the position of my body, and then to exude kind of a peaceful energy.
Yeah.
And then that will kind of spiral itself up, or it will kind of keep the engine going.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
inspiring to me.
Cool.
Yeah.
We did not plan that. So that's great, right? We have this understanding that there is something internal that we can adjust first. And from there, the outer world will ripple, right? And if you've ever thought of any self-development conversation or philosophy or thought system, you recognize that when you change the inner world, the outer world reflects that change. And so that's where we start. So from the inside, we talked briefly about the central column that connects the floor of your pelvis to the crown of your head. Now, this isn't a ramrod stick straight line of energy, which is what maybe we used to think about in the spine. But the curvature of this central column, bring your hands together like this, like you're holding your crystal ball. If you tip the hands forward, you can see this shape. It's kind of columnar, it's orb-like, it's a sphere. Take your hands now around your neck. This is the same size. So everyone should have similar size when they bring their hands, we call it globe, around their neck. It's pretty much comparable in size. So this is, you can bring them around in front of you again, as a reminder, this is the shape of your internal column that runs connecting sky energy, this sort of like higher consciousness place, to earth, to the more grounded, the more physical, the more real in concrete space.
This is really big.
It's really big.
I'm surprised. Are people surprised?
I don't know that I've ever actually had someone really consider that right away, because in so many times it's like it's just something we do with our hands, and so it's easy to be disconnected with it. But Daniel's not disconnected. I mean, he's very much a grounded person. So he's literally going, okay, well, how the hell do I find this much space inside, right? Well, we find it by widening, by getting more dimensional, by literally popping ourselves from a 2D paper doll mentality, from like squeezing our shoulder blades, tucking our tailbone, pulling our chin down, which makes the back of our body flat. And then we start to pop ourselves open into more dimension by getting wider and more spherical in 3 places: the ribs, the pelvic bowl, and the crown of the head. Maggie's my sister said, so great to have a visual. This is awesome. So yeah, so hello. So we're super excited to give someone who's not connected to Bowspring so much an opportunity to practice these principles. So the spheres of the hips, the heart, and the head are meant to go wider. And how the heck do you widen your skull?
I don't know, imaginationally?
There we go. Well, let's just go with it as an imagination. But one of the first things I like to say is horizon eyes. So what it would be, not to look up to the sky, not to look down necessarily, but to just look straight out to the horizon. You get a little bit more level in the chin, more open in the neck on all sides, right? And the capacity then for the head to be held up means that it's going to be supported from the base, right? So the hips actually go wider when they move further behind you. When he was standing before with a pelvic thrust, his pelvis is actually narrowing and the base of his pelvic floor was closing off. And so when we lose, we literally cut ourselves off from the earth, from the grounded energy below us, when we tuck our tailbone, when we slouch, and when we lose the power behind us, which particularly means the glutes. But we always want to start with somewhere deeper, the rib cage. So I start with horizon eyes because you open up your gaze, but you also allow for the energy to be a little bit more fluid, for it to channel up and down the spine. But for making the most massive change in the body, we have to start to look at how can we make the biggest, widest sphere at the center. We think sometimes our center is at the low belly or the solar plexus, and there is definite energies there that we'll discuss. But the biggest energy that we can address is our heart, how we hold ourselves in compassion and yet still with courage, with presence to put ourselves out in the world. And if we only squeeze our shoulder blades together, we're going from that one-dimensional place where we're flat on the back and over-presented and sort of overly proud on the front. So bring your hands around into that front place again, that globe. And I just want you to bring them low, right in front of your belly button. And so, yeah, fingers down. So the first thing, and this is what I want to share, and I'll leave you all with this today. The first thing that's going to help you get to radiant heart, in its language, it's just words, but it means a multidimensional opening of your rib cage and the energy of your heart 360 degrees, right? We know anymore that we can measure our heart's energy up to a mile. And so as we get bigger on the inside, our heart's radiant energy is able to spread and express itself so clearly without overbearing anybody else's energy, but rather meet energies with a really sweet and compassionate place. The first thing to help make that happen is to bring the arms into the front of the body. Most of the time when we're hanging down, when we're collapsing, our elbows go back. And then we put our phone involved in it and we drop our head and we've actually closed off the channel that connects earth and sky. So I asked him to hold this space in his hands, which represents central channel, but now also look at the shape that he has in his arms. From the shoulder to his fingertips, we have this sort of wrapped around energy that literally represents the shape of his ribs. So relax your arms for a second. The ribs attach on the back at the spine a little bit higher than when they attach on the front at the sternum. So from the arm position, go one more time. From the top and around, the arms literally represent the shape of his rib cage. Now I bring my hand right in between his shoulder blades and they're apart from each other. They're up and wide on his upper back, which then gives him a lot more lightening for the whole torso to start to get in suspension instead of compression, which is what happens as gravity takes over as we get older. So there's a lightening of the load here, which we'll talk about. But this central column is represented in his hands. He moves his arms forward, keeps his elbows really wide, and his radiant ribs are represented in how he holds his arms. Now you can just rest your hands in your lap and see right away how the elbows close in, and you almost resisted it because you don't want to lose that space, which is great. So we're going to give him just a little bit more of this space, and now all I want you to do, I'm going to put my hands right on the sides of his ribs. I want you to just move your ribs side to side, a little bit left, a little bit right. And you can see, can you make it even bigger? Yeah, good. This is actually not the easiest movement for a lot of people. And so as I get him to move side to side, he's waking up the flank of the body. Keep going with it. He's waking up the sides of his body, which are perpetually closed. When we go from the fetal position of fight or flight to a more empowered and open position, I say we open all of our tickle spots, right? So right? So it's the things that are sensitive that you would protect, that you would squeeze in if someone came in with their tickle fingers, right? And so underarms, side bodies, they're very sensitive places. So as he's moving side to side, he's actually giving a little push from the inside out. And with that push, he's meeting the boundary of his skin and bone. With this new boundary, right, or with this visceral sense of the boundary, because he's literally trying to push into it, the boundary changes. If you live in a daily basis in this smaller place, your boundary is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you want to be on the leading edge of your own life, you have to continuously push into the boundaries that are there so that they can change and evolve. I'm going to leave it there today because him and I will kind of process through this. We're going to come back again next Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. But I just wanted to introduce those concepts because you pushing into your own boundaries is something that I can't necessarily encourage you to do more than just telling you that this is how you can open yourself to your potential. Push from the inside out. Give yourself that experience of connecting earth to sky by lifting your eyes to a new horizon and then pushing your ribs open on all sides. So tell me quickly, questions, how does that feel? It's super subtle, but is there anything that you notice you could practice all week long?
Well, I'm worried, like I'm seeing that there are other things attached to my ribs as you're telling me to move my ribs side to side. Mm-hmm. You can even see it like, okay, does that mean my shoulder drops? Does that mean my pelvic bowl tips in like up or down in direction? It's like the stuff's connected, so it's like how do I do this? It's either it like compensates the other way.
Well, that's really important. When you pull a thread on your shirt, the whole design changes. right? Same thing in the connective tissue of the body, which he's recognizing when he makes an adjustment in one part, there's a ripple. It's a cascade through the whole thing. So we'll talk about how to really manage and sometimes micromanage those subtleties, but the most important thing is that you're aware. When you make one movement, especially at the deepest core, there's going to be a ripple throughout the whole body that will understand how to take it through the edges.
So if I'm not able to isolate just my ribs, I'm not like doing it wrong necessarily for a beginner?
Perfect. Not at all. Not at all. You're just starting to explore the dimension and the boundary of what you have right now, right? And that, so it's like there's a starting point. There is an access point for every human body. And I've met a lot of them. I've worked with a lot of them over the last decade plus. There is an access point for everyone. You meet yourself where you are, which is acknowledging where is my boundary, and from there it can start to change and grow. And so that's all I'm going to leave him with today, is just thinking about all week long this vertical axis that's dynamic, it's agile, it's not ramrod straight, and then this multi-dimensional opening in the rib cage, which will ultimately create a sense of lightness and levity throughout the whole structure. Can you work on that this week?
Yes.
Cool. Promise to be with me next week, Tuesday?
Of course.
All right. Join us again in a week, 8 days. It's my birthday tomorrow, so if you're interested in still getting the massive discount for the Accelerate Body Consciousness, today, tomorrow is the it. And we might have another announcement tomorrow that you might want to check into for an extra bonus if you want to work with us. All right. We'll talk to you guys soon. Daniel, thank you so much. Courage. I just love courageous people. So appreciate his moving from terrified to empowered.
Yeah.
Can we say that? Awesome. Great, y'all. Thank you. Have an awesome week. Talk to you soon. Love you.